Smith.
I don't think so, buddy.
You know, I have to tell you, I'm standing back there and watching the same monitor that you are, and for me, I'm realizing, wow, these are three incredibly successful men that I had the the honor to interview over the years. And I realized I'm standing with their three sons. First time I've ever been with all three sons, and probably for us as well, of these great men. And a part of loving Michigan is understanding when there are people that love Michigan like these three men so obviously did. It's a part of what now carries on in a legacy with these boys. And we're about to find out just how easy that was, or maybe even difficult that was. I'll start with you, David Van Elslander. Your father was known for being a doer, both in business and in his philanthropic efforts. Do you think your father thought about that lasting impact of his vision?
I think he did, not at first, though. So whenever an opportunity came along, my father would always get a lot of opinions from his friends, his colleagues, his family, and ultimately, though, he'd make the decision on his own. You know, he was a strategic businessman. He had a big heart, a soft heart, and that's where the philanthropy came from, his heart. You know, they said in the film, his philosophy was, if you have he feels a responsibility to give back to the community, and he was so grateful for the community support that returning that support was just the most natural thing in the world to him.
And for you, David Barfield, whether it was his work with Washtenaw Community College or the Park Ridge Community Center in Ypsilanti, your father's skills as a leader inspired others to engage. Your dad was really a show-me guy. He taught others as part of what he did. When did you notice that he was more than just about building and growing his business? He was about folding in other people and bringing them along and helping them.
Yeah, at a pretty early age, you know, I'm from a family of 6, and we used to always joke that every dinner was like a board meeting. And one of the things that he always talked about was the founding principles of the company together. It was never the quality of the services without the fairness to its people, and it was never either of those two principles without giving back to the community. So from a very early age, we were all taught of the obligation that we all had, given the fact that he had experienced some success, he and my mother, and the obligation to give back and to communicate, and to give back and to share, you know, with the community.
Dan DeVos, we looked at that video, very well narrated by Patty Poppy. We look at the many projects. We know about many projects. The things that happened in Grand Rapids continue to happen. Projects that were stimulated and supported by your father. Was it easy for him to ask other business leaders in the community to get on board?
Yeah, it was for him. You know, he's a salesman. So he had no problem going out and talking to them about things that he really believed in, that he was passionate. And when you're passionate about something, others can, you know, get that same feeling, and once they get passionate, you know, they'll sign on board. So he was always willing to go out and try something. And as he always told us when we were growing up, he said, you go out and ask somebody, what can they do? All they can do is say no. And that doesn't mean no to you forever. It means no maybe for this project, maybe no at this time for whatever reason. But for him, it's always just go back and then ask him next time. And then ask him next time.
Keep asking. I'm going to ask you first, Dan. When did you first realize that Dad was more than just your dad, but that he was having an effect on thousands and really millions of other people? When did that strike you as a child?
Some of the first recollections of myself and the Amway business was an annual Amway convention that was held in downtown Grand Rapids. And at that point, it was big. You know, we thought it was big, a couple thousand people down there. But when you start to see the reaction of people and start to talk to the people and see how he communicated with them and they communicated with him, and you could see the passion in their eyes and you could hear their stories, the impact that Dad and the company has had on them. You know, that was something that came at an early age and, you know, sticks with you.
David?
We're from the south side of Ypsilanti, and Ypsilanti is a small town. And my mother and father experienced some success early on when they sold their first business, and were kind of celebrated for that. I think partly because of the story that they had, given that he came from nothing and built a business that was purchased by a kind of a Fortune 500 type company. So it was big news in the area, and as a result, he was kind of a local hero. And more than anything, I think he represented a lot of hope for people and a lot of pride for people. So he and my mom were celebrated for that. So we could not go anywhere in that town where someone did not know him, black or white. And he also had the personality that was very attractive to people. He was always kind. He was always willing to help, always willing to listen. And as a result, he made lots of friends. And so again, I learned very early on that he was someone special. He never took any of that for granted. He was always appreciative. And again, just felt the need to make sure that he led by example.
You know what I just noticed in just your first couple of answers? You've been very careful to say my dad and my mom. They were kind of a package together, apparently, in the business. And that's not always the case when we're lauding outstanding men who have accomplished a lot. In fact, we don't have your mother's name on the list of those that we're lauding, but you keep bringing her up.
The reason that I do is one, they were together for 65 years. They started every single business together. And although my father, thank you. Because of his personality, he was very outgoing. My mom was a little less so. He received all of the credit, but he never once publicly spoke without giving my mom half of the credit. In fact, he gave her 51% of the credit. So it's so it's just something that I've always tried to stay conscious of. It was not just him; they were a team. They did everything together, and it's important to me that she is recognized along with him.
Quick study that I am, gentlemen. I hope you're making note. Dan Lepp. I'd like to say thank you to my wife, Kim. David Van Elslander, your father, when people knew him as Archie, which is a long time ago, because I kind of asked the question when we were backstage, when did you first notice? Well, his father was, it's hard to believe for those of us who knew Art Van in his final years, but he was very low-key.
Yeah.
In the end, he was not so low-key.
No, and I think, he always flew under the radar. He wanted to do what he did very quietly. He didn't need the fanfare. And then I think in 1990, when he wrote the checks to save the Thanksgiving Day Parade in Detroit, that's kind of when it dawned on people, Art Van's not just a furniture company, there's a man behind it.
And it was a big check.
Yeah.
And there are some other members of the Van Elslanders here in the audience here.
Yep.
I bet a week doesn't go by, you can tell me if I'm wrong, that somebody doesn't thank you again for your dad thanking for saving the American.
If not me, for sure one of them, but yeah, there's a lot of recognition. Honestly, when he made the decision in 1990, he didn't realize the impact it would have, but he said, it was probably the smartest decision I ever made, not only for my business, but for the city.
But by the way, the family continues to support, and
Absolutely.
He continued to support.
And will continue.
Will continue. Where's Tony Michaels? Tony? There's Tony. Tony is writing that down right now. Well, we appreciate it again and again, and I hope you don't get tired of us talking about it. Is there one project that, besides obviously saving America's Thanksgiving Parade, presented by Art Van, anything else that was an important game changer in making Michigan better that you can think of right now?
That my father was responsible for? I don't, I think when he established the Art Van Charity Challenge in 2009, and that was really when he formalized his charitable giving, because before that he did everything on his own. There was no formal board, there was no foundation, there was no committee other than his family, friends, and colleagues. But like I said, he made the decisions by himself. And but when he came up with the Art Van Charity Challenge, and that he donated $1 million to Michigan charities, and it was a grassroots kind of grant program that ended up raising $5 million. And I'm very, very proud. My family's very, very proud of that because today that continues, and now there's been $10 million donated, over $25 million raised for 450 Midwest charities.
Wow. And for you, David Barfield, one of these projects, making Michigan better, a game changer, we kind of touched on that, but a little bit more.
Yeah, I would say it's Park Ridge. Most of you have never heard of this community center, but it's on the south side of Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is the poorest part of that town. And a number of years ago, when the city of Ypsilanti was going through some of its challenges, it became known that they were going to have to close the center. Well, the center was very important to not only to the residents of the south side of Ypsilanti, but also to my father. Park Ridge sits in the middle of the housing project that he lived in when his family came from the south. So it was home to him. And it was also the only place that kids in that neighborhood had to go that was safe to be. So when he learned that the city was going to have to close it, not because they wanted to close it, but because they did not have the financial resources, he felt the need to do something about it. He leveraged his name, he leveraged his reputation in the community, he leveraged his friends and other members of the community. He also leveraged his relationships within the city and with educational friends. And between the city of Ypsilanti, my father, and some of his business contacts in Washtenaw Community College, they were able to form a partnership that allows Park Ridge to operate today. And I think it's important in terms of Love Michigan because here's a person that grew up there that never forgot where he came from. He constantly did work to help that community. And then when he saw a need to act, he brought forces together, which is very similar to what we're trying to do here at the policy conference. We have business people, we have educators, and we have politicians that are trying to come together to solve problems. So I think it's a perfect example for why we sit here today at this policy conference.
Dan?
Biggest project that he's been working
So many, I know, and a
Pardon
lot
me?
of them are Grand Rapids.
A lot of them Grand Rapids, yeah, and that's certainly has been his focus and always was. But it's really sort of a project, is number one project, number 1A, and number 1B, and number 1C, number 1D, sort of down the line, because they all sort of dovetail, I think, together. And certainly the biggest thing for him and for the community was the Amory Grand Plaza Hotel, having that open in 1981, and start the renovation, revitalization of downtown Grand Rapids, because anybody who'd been there knows what it was like. It's like a lot of areas around this part of the world. It wasn't going anywhere. And so when they decided to renovate that, it was a big risk that they took. There was no way that they could see it was going to be a good business investment, but they saw it as a good community investment. And so that started sort of the first phase of what was going on, downtown. And another thing that sort of was made possible because of that is the merger of Butterworth Hospital and Blodgett Hospital. And that's something that he was very proud of. And that then, because we had a downtown that was coming, and then that hospital system came, in which, of course, became Spectrum. And now is just, an unbelievable center for the region, has been, something that I know he was immensely proud of. And then sort of the other leg of that stool was the education side. And he has always been involved in Grand Valley University. And a lot of this they mentioned on the video. And because we had a vibrant downtown now, because we had the medical center, now we needed the component of education downtown. And so bringing that component downtown really made the difference. And from there, everything else is just sort of piling on in a very positive way.
So what was, and this is one of those questions that the other two get to think about, but I'm coming to you first. David Van Elslander, what was the best thing about having a famous, successful father, and the worst thing about having a famous and successful father?
Wow. Well, the best thing is that we got, when you walk into a restaurant and it was full. You got your seat right over.
That's a pretty good thing.
That's pretty good.
Honestly, it was. Just watching him work, because I had the pleasure of working side by side with him for a lot of years, and I was proud to be in the room with him. He was just a great man to be. I just watched him work the room. He was just a terrific people person. He could read a room, read people, and just observing that and watching him operate was an education in itself.
Was the worst thing after getting that table always in a restaurant, knowing that you weren't just going to be sitting there with the family and just easily eat a dinner without being interrupted?
Yeah, well, some of that. Yeah, we did get some of that because we'd frequent the same restaurant. So yeah, we did get a lot of interruptions. Yeah. But honestly, I can't complain about too much because it was really he was always such a shining example for all of us, for my siblings and myself and the grandchildren too. So,
Dan, the best and the worst.
Well, I think certainly you get a lot of opportunity because of who your father is and what he's become, and just like you talked about, whether it be the table in the restaurant or you get to meet some very interesting people, go some very interesting places that you just won't have access to before. And because he was, like other fathers here, they're outgoing, they're out doing things, they're making a difference, they're looking at where they can go and what they can do. And so we had a lot of opportunity, and we had a lot of great time doing things together individually, working with him as I did for 20 years, or as a family, doing those things that we were able to do as a family together. But on the other side of that coin, as I think that the hardest things that I'm sure the other guys agree too is that as they're doing good things, they're out there trying to make things happen, and they are making things happen. And then you have somebody in left field out, throwing stones your way, questioning your motivation, questioning why you're doing things, questioning them, and questioning beyond just that, but themselves, their character, and everything else. And you're looking at that, they say, these guys don't even know what they're talking about, or this individual. They're saying these things that are absolutely untrue. And it's probably, I think it was harder on us, on the family. My dad just shrugged it off. He said, you climb up the ladder, the more you get exposed, and that's the way it goes. But to see that, but to see people doing it to them was really hard.
It's your dad.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Your dad
Yeah, it's him, and we know him, and we know that's not him. We know what you're saying about him is not right. We know his heart, and that's where it all came from. And from my dad, it always came from the heart. His heart would sort of lead him where to go, and his heart and his values, and his dedication to his family, community, and business. And that's what drove him. I mean, it was. It's money didn't drive him, fame didn't drive him. It's just a result of what happened. So he was always leading with his heart and with his values. And so it's hard when those are challenged by others. David Barfield.
Yeah, I was lucky. I had an opportunity to grow up with my hero. And a lot of individuals admired my parents, but I had the opportunity to be with them every single day. And I think about it a lot more as I get older, with a family of my own. I want to be a good husband. I want to be a good father. I want to be a good business person, and I want to make an impact, a positive impact in the community. And I was able to. I had a front row seat on all of those. So to be able to grow up with your hero and your role model and someone who really becomes your best friend is really, really special. So that's the best thing, is I lived with my role model for all of the right reasons, and I feel really fortunate about that. I think the hardest thing is trying to continue to do things that you hope would make your parents proud. And that's kind of my North Star today.
You think about it, we all are raised by parents, generally, hopefully, that want us to do better. They want more for us than we had as a parent. Mm-hmm. That's going to be very difficult for I'll use,
big shoes to fill.
I could use any number of other people, but whether it's Steve Jobs or somebody like that who their children would never have had a chance to achieve the same sorts of level of success. So does that ever get overwhelming, that feeling of that you had such a successful father, no one should really expect you to top what he did? My dad wanted me to top what he did, and he was proud of the fact that I did. He didn't go to college, I went to college. He never made a lot of money doing what he did in the family business. You guys are facing a whole different mountain to climb that Steve Jobs, or as I mentioned, or any number of these guys that are the famous names that we can call upon, and we're talking about your last names as well. You're in a position that's different than most kids, where the parents said, oh, you're going to do even better than me, and we're going to watch
I don't
that
think it's
happen.
about topping them or doing better than them. I think it's carrying on what they started and continuing their legacy and teaching our children to carry that legacy as well. And, you know, talk about the morals and the values that they had and what was important to them. And, you know, it's funny, as we sit here and I listen to the answers that Dan and David are giving, it's remarkable how similar the three
Have you
men
guys
were.
ever been together before?
I know Dan because I spent some time in Grand Rapids, a lot of time actually, and saw that transformation happen. You know, I'd go back every few months and I'd see different things going on in the city, and that's the transformation in Grand Rapids, largely due to the DeVos family, Van Andel family, the Myers, but largely due to the DeVos family, is quite remarkable. So congratulations to you.
Thanks.
Well, it's good to have the three of you together for the first time that I'm aware of.
Yeah,
And,
it's great. I knew Art a bit over the years, and grew to have a great respect for Art. And you know, he is, you know, and you're so much like him. It's funny how you see the characteristics as the family goes down. But Art was a guy who, you know, always had a big smile on his face, and he was always out there, and, you know, always encouraging, always supporting. And so, you know, it's fun now that David and I have known each other, you know, a bit over the years, and now David too. So it's a great opportunity.
The amazing, coincidence is that David, and Dan all lost their fathers last year. They all passed away in 2018, and we're having this moment to sit here and to remember them and celebrate their lives and your lives as you carry on in the way that you've just talked about.
Yeah.
So I guess I would ask you first, David. What do you miss most about your dad?
Oh, my goodness. His smile.
Simple enough. The smile. Dan?
I'd say his unending positive attitude, his support, and his always wanting anybody he's with to be better after they were with him than they were before, to give him encouragement to carry on and to always be there for anybody with that positive support and words of encouragement.
David?
I think, you know, when you went to him with a problem, he made you feel like it was the only problem in the world, but he always said to me, there's nothing we can't solve together. So that's, you know, I talk to him almost every day, obviously, and I still do. And, you know, I miss him a lot.
What one lesson did he teach you that you would be sure to teach your children or anyone else that you were in a position to teach and help? What would that one strong lesson be?
You know, the one thing that my father always reminded us of is the importance of a good reputation. He talked about the fact that it took forever to build, and the wrong decision could waste it all. So, you know, I think the one lesson that I think about is doing everything to maintain a positive and a good reputation.
I say it starts with being true to yourself, making sure that your foundation is solid, that you have your belief system, you know what you believe in, and you don't vary from your beliefs, and that you make sure you think beyond yourself. I mean, if you got to focus on other people, and always been taught and believed that, you know, you do good for other people, and it'll come back to you eventually in some way. If you focus on yourself and you just try to make yourself better, it's not going to work. And so he was always out there, teaching us to make the difference out there. Don't worry about ourselves. Ourselves it'll happen. It'll take care of itself. Just like his commitment that he made to everybody else. That's just the way he always was. He was always giving, and not expecting anything in return. But when you do give, it just comes back.
Be humble. Remember where you came from. He started with a 4,000 square foot store on the east side of Detroit, and never did he dream that it would become the business that it did. But
How many stores now? The sleep stores, all the stores?
oh, I think the private equity firm bought a couple companies since they purchased us in 2017, and I think they're up to about 180 locations today, and going from Chicago to Missouri to Maryland actually, and all the way through. So. But that's it. And the other thing I do want to say is the one thing he said is learn how to be a salesman, because once you can sell, you can do anything. You'll always have a job.
Yeah.
Words to live by, my friend.
Yeah.
Once you can sell, you'll always have a job. What would be, since we think we know your dads by their actions and their accomplishments, and now by knowing their sons a little bit, what would be the most surprising thing about your dad that we might not know, Dan?
Well, I think the fact that spending time with a family, especially when we were growing up, before
He had time to spend time with the family building a dynasty.
He always had time for a family. And the thing that he really liked to do when we were young, the kids were young, is play football on the beach. We'd play football, the kids line up, and he'd like to get out there and just mix it up with the family and friends, whoever we had to be with us. And we played countless hours of football on the beach growing up. And so he was always active, engaged, and he just loved to interact with younger people, our friends or ourselves. And so those are the type of things that the sporting side that he could do, the way he played tennis and the way he played ping pong. He liked those type of activities.
Competitive?
Oh, yeah. And he could have these little dink shots which he loved doing all the time, especially in both, in table tennis and in regular tennis. He just gets those little lobs over there, and he just loved to do that.
He didn't feel compelled to let you win?
Oh, not at all. No. He liked to see us suffer when he did that, because we're sitting, too far away, and we can't even move to get there, and he just got a kick out of that.
What about you, David?
He never wanted to stop learning. And, up until his last days, he was always very, very interested in learning something new. Whether it's his computer or whether it's his phone. And, I would say, who cares how it works? Just use it. Don't worry about why it's working and how it's working. Just use the device. I remember him. I remember he took up horseback riding. So he started horseback riding. My mom bought him a horse. Next thing I know, he starts fox hunting. And he
overachiever.
Yeah. So he was fortunate enough to ride in a couple of different countries, but he had a club that was not too far from Ann Arbor where he rode, and I remember one day he came home and he was just kind of laughing at himself, and I said, "What's so funny?" He says, "David, maybe I'm taking this fox riding thing a little too seriously." He says, "How do you think it looks for a black man from the south side of Ypsilanti to be on a horse yelling tally ho?" And he said, "It just got pretty good to me, and next thing you know, So, he was funny, he was kind, he had a great sense of humor. And I think the biggest thing is he was so nice to everyone. He one day said, "David, you just make sure you never let anyone take your kindness for weakness." Because everyone saw the big smile, everyone saw the big personality, but he was more aggressive and more competitive than anyone that I know. So those are some things I think people would
Surprise us, David, if you can, with something about Art Van that we might not know.
Boy, he was a very, very competitive tennis player. He loved playing tennis. He loved playing golf only with his sons, though. So when we would go out, you know, we're obviously.
He would play golf only with his son?
No, not only with
Oh,
his sons,
okay.
but normally that's when he played. He wasn't a huge golfer, so we'd say, come on, let's play golf instead of tennis, and so he'd do that. But boy, oh boy, was he competitive, because we'd, you know, get around you'd finish off the hole and say, okay, Dad, what'd you get? And he'd say, well, I got a 6. We'd be like, 6? You sure it wasn't an 8? What, are you counting strokes now? Well, actually, yes, we are counting strokes.
And they were playing for money.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, honestly, he wasn't full of a whole lot of surprises. He was, what you saw is what you got.
we have a minute or so, a little over a minute. If you could have just one more day with your dad, briefly, how would that day be spent? David?
I thought I'd have a little more time to answer that one.
I'm glad you got that.
Yeah, you have the time. Just saying thank you.
Beautiful. Just saying thank you. Dan?
I think spending time would be just being there, just being sort of around, and just because he had this glow about him, you know, and to get more of that positive energy that he gave off, just to be there and to hear him talk about, you know, where he'd been and how he got there, and the things that really mattered to him.
And David?
I'd want to be where he wanted to be, and that would be on his boat on the water on a nice sunny day, just hanging out. And then I think if I knew it was my last day with him, I'd say, Dad, what is the one thing that you wanted me to take away from what you've done in your life? And just ask that question, and hopefully he'd answer it. I never got to ask him that, though.